Chapter 3: The Writing of the U.S. Constitution. Your learning objectives are to identify the 5 main ideas behind the U.S. and state constitutions, to explain how the country's first constitution was too weak to keep lasting peace and safety among the 13 states, outline how the U.S. Constitution was written and passed. The words to know are Confederation, which is an agreement of friendship between states. National, having to do with the whole nation or country. Trade, the carrying on of business between states and countries. Federal government, a form of government with 2 parts, a national government and a stable government. Union, the joining of states into one U.S. government. Constitutional Convention, the meeting in 1787 in Philadelphia to write a new plan for a U.S. government. Compromise, the making of an agreement in which each side gives up something. Slave, a person who could be bought, sold, and owned by another person. Export, any product sent from one country to another for purpose of trade. Amendment, change or correction to a written document. Early state government. Even before the Declaration of Independence was written, many of the colonies had their own constitutions. These constitutions gave power to the people instead of the king. By the end of 1777, most of the states in the newly formed United States had written constitutions. The state constitutions were not all alike, however. They all shared 5 main ideas. Rule by the people. The power of the government rests only in the hands of the people. 2 was limited government. The government must have only a few powers, and they may be decided on and granted only by the people. Number 3, rights and freedoms. All people have certain rights and freedoms that government cannot take away. 7 states had a Bill of Rights written into their constitution. Number 4, separation of powers. Government was divided into 3 branches or parts. One branch had the power to pass laws. Another branch had the power to carry out the laws. The third branch had the power to judge the laws. With this system, the power of each branch of government were limited. Checks and balances. Each branch of the government had the power to check or hold back Checks and balances. Each branch of the government had the power to check or hold back the acts of the other branches. These checks helped to balance power between the branches and to limit the power of government. In 1787, these 5 ideas became the basic principles of the U.S. Constitution. Remember those for the questions. Okay. The Confederation of States. The new states knew they had to join together as a group in some way. However, they were against a strong government that would have power over the states. The Second Continental Congress wrote a plan for a government of a confederation between the states. This plan was called the Articles of Confederation. Also, over here on the left, after their experience of living under the strong national government of Great Britain, the new states wanted to keep the power to themselves. Okay, moving on. The plan was called the Articles of Confederation. It was ratified or approved by the states in 1781. That set up the first national government of the United States. Under the Articles, the states would be a group of friends working together. The loose government between them would keep peace. Under the Articles, the states would be a group of friends working together. The loose government between them would keep peace and keep them safe. Representatives were sent to a Congress, and each state had 1 vote. Congress itself had just a few important powers. It could make war and peace. It could deal with other countries. It could borrow money or help the states do businesses with other countries. It could ask the states for money or soldiers. However, the new Congress had no power to tax the states. Although Congress had no power to pass laws, it had no power to carry them out. Whoops. However, the new Congress had no power to tax the states. Although Congress had power to pass laws, it had no power to carry them out. It also had no power to make rules about trade between the states. These limits on the national government soon caused problems. The states began to act like 13 separate small countries. Some began to print their own money. Many states put taxes on food or goods that came into their states. This made enemies of other states. All the states set up their own armies, and many set up their own navies. Congress owed large amounts of money that had been borrowed to pay for the war. Even the soldiers who fought in the war had not yet been paid. However, Congress did not have any money or any real power to raise it. Problems were also widespread in the states. U.S. money had little worth. Many farmers and store owners lost their businesses. Angry farmers and other businessmen who lost money took up arms against their own state governments. Finally, it became clear that the government under the article was too weak. Something had to be done. In 1787, Congress sent a letter to all of the states. The letter asked them to send representatives to a meeting in Philadelphia. The letter explained some changes in the government had to be made. The federal government had to have more powers. If not, the Union would surely come to an end. Let's go back up here really quick. History fact. George Washington was not happy about the way the states acted towards one another. He wrote, "We are one nation today and 13 tomorrow." Okay, check your understanding. List 4 powers that Congress had under the Articles of Confederation. Check your understanding. List 4 powers that Congress had under the Articles of Confederation. What do you think was the greatest weakness of the federal government under the Articles of Confederation? Why was this a problem? Here's a government fact. A delegate to a meeting or convention is the same as a representative. Okay, here we go. The Constitutional Convention. All the states except Rhode Island sent delegates to the meeting in Philadelphia. The convention began with the idea of making some changes in the Articles of Confederation. Very soon, that idea changed. The Articles were too weak and had too many faults. The delegates decided to write a brand new national constitution. As a result, the meeting in Philadelphia became known as the Constitutional Convention. Here's a picture of Ben Franklin. He provided advice to the delegates of the Constitutional Convention. The delegates agreed on the main ideas for a new federal government. They agreed it should have 3 branches. The new government needed power to make laws. It also needed the power to carry out and judge the laws. In addition, it had to have the power to raise money to do its work. Remember, in this system of dividing a government into 3 branches, no one branch has more power than another. Okay. However, the delegates could not agree on how to set up each branch of the government. However, the delegates could not agree on how to set up each branch of the new government. The large states wanted to have more votes in Congress than the smaller states. Smaller states wanted all states to have equal votes. Arguments between the large and small states ran long into the night. Each side had to give in on some points. In the end, the delegates made several compromises. Some truly great new ideas took shape. These were written into the Constitution and have survived to the present day. That's good. Compromises made at the convention. The Great Compromise. How many representatives should each state have in Congress? The large and small states fought fiercely on this question. The compromise they reached was the plan we have today. The federal government has 2 houses of Congress. All states have 2 equal votes in the Senate. Votes in the House of Representatives are based on the population of each state. Larger states have more votes. The Three-Fifths Compromise. The Southern states wanted to count their many slaves in order to get more seats in Congress. The Northern states were against counting slaves as part of the state's population. Finally, they agreed to count 3/5 of the slave population in the state. The number of representatives was balanced between North and South. However, the South also had to pay for 3/5 of their slaves when federal taxes were placed on all of the people. The Slave Trade Compromise. All states agreed that Congress needed the power to make rules on trade. Yet the Southern states were afraid that Congress would end the slave trade. They were also afraid that Congress would tax exports. They were also afraid that Congress would tax exports, products that one country sells to other countries. Tobacco from the Southern states was the leading export of the whole country. If Congress taxed exports, the Southern states would have to pay the most tax. In the end, the states compromised. The federal government had full power to make the rules of trade. However, under the compromise, Congress could not end the slave trade for at least 20 years. The debate for or against the Constitution. The Constitution was finally written. It set up a representative government with 3 branches. It was based on the same important ideas as the state constitution that came before it. However, a whole new test began. Before it became law, the Constitution had to be ratified or accepted by at least 9 states. The American people were divided into 2 groups of thought about the Constitution. The Federalists liked the Constitution. The American people were divided into 2 groups of thought about the Constitution. The Federalists liked the Constitution. The Federalists liked the Constitution with its strong national government. They felt the Constitution created many federal powers, but still left many powers to the states. This group was made up of mostly professional people. Lawyers, doctors, and ministers. Wealthy merchants and newspaper owners were also in favor of ratifying the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists were afraid that the new Constitution went too far in taking power away from the states. They were afraid the rights of the people might be taken away as well. The Anti-Federalists were mostly farmers, small business owners, and townspeople. Here's a picture of James Madison, the leading contributor to the writing of the Constitution. Later, as one of the authors of the Federalist Papers, he argued strongly for its ratification. Okay, continuing on. The debate about ratification went on for weeks throughout the country. The Federalists defended their position in a series of newspaper articles. James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay carefully explained what had been done in Philadelphia and why. These famous articles are known today as the Federalist Papers. Here's a government fact. The Federalist Papers are still admired today. They clearly show how political ideas apply to everyday life. Interesting. In December 1787, Delaware became the first state to ratify the Constitution. By the summer of 1788, 9 states had approved this document. The Constitution was now the supreme law of the land. In time, all 13 states approved the Constitution. However, some states, like Virginia, insisted that a Bill of Rights be added to the original document. They wanted certain freedoms to be clearly protected. Therefore, in 1791, this Bill of Rights became the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. Landmark changes in the law. The United States gets a constitution. The delegates to the convention began their meeting on May 25, 1787. For the next 3.5 months, through a hot Philadelphia summer, the debate went on. The Constitutional Convention was the meeting of the brightest, richest men in the country. Benjamin Franklin was there, along with George Washington, James Madison, and more than 50 others. They met in secret. They met in secret to write the laws that would form a new government. Luckily, James Madison took many notes about what had happened each day. Today we have a good record of what went on. At times, angry words were traded back and forth. Some days there seemed to be no way to reach a compromise. Ben Franklin even asked the group to begin each day's meeting with a prayer. Most of the men were well-to-do lawyers, teachers, or landowners. Most of the country was made up of poor farmers and working people. Because of this, it could be said that this meeting was not truly representative of the people. However, working people could not afford to take 3 or 4 months off to do the work of the government. The men at the convention had worked for years in government. 11 years earlier, some of them had signed the Declaration of Independence. Most of them had served in colonial assemblies or in their own state governments. They all believed strongly in the rights of the people and in limited government. You decide, was the average citizen of the United States fairly represented at the Constitutional Convention? Why or why not? 39 representatives signed the Constitution on September 17th in 1787. The final document contained ideas from the Magna Carta, English written law, and the several state constitutions. In addition, it fulfilled the wishes of one delegate who spoke during the convention. He said that the Constitution should be written not for the moment, but for future generations of Americans. Chapter 4: A Close Look at the Constitution. The first section of the United States Constitution is shown in the photograph above. Your learning objectives this week are to identify the basic principles behind the Constitution, explain how the Constitution sets up the federal government in 7 articles, explain the meaning and importance of the Bill of Rights. The words to know are legislative branch, executive branch, judicial branch, trial, senator, and unconstitutional. So keep an eye out for them. The basic principles behind the Constitution. On July 4th, 1788, the people of Philadelphia turned out for a parade. They cheered loudly for a model ship named Constitution. The ship stood for the new government of the United States. The people hoped the new government would be lasting. They wanted to see the country grow strong over the coming years. In 1987, people all over the world celebrated the 200th anniversary of the writing of the Constitution. The government that had been set up more than 200 years ago in Philadelphia had indeed lasted. It lasted through many changes and many tough times. The United States started as a small country with a few million people, most of whom were farmers. Today it is a country with hundreds of thousands of different businesses and a population of more than 270 million. Remarkably, in more than 220 years, the Constitution has been changed only 27 times. The Constitution, written in 1787, sets up a plan for government in 7 articles. That plan is based on the following principles. Ruled by the people. In a democracy, the people hold the power to make all the laws. Limited powers. Government must not be too strong. Freedoms must be protected. Separation of powers. Power in government is divided among 3 branches: the legislative branch, the executive, and the judicial branch. Checks and balances. The courts must throw out any state laws that go against the United States Constitution. Number 6, federal government. The United States government has some powers. The state governments have their own powers. The outline of the U.S. Constitution. This is the preamble. The opening words tells why the Constitution was written. Article 1 is the legislative branch. It sets up a way to make laws. The Congress does that. Article 2, the executive branch. It sets up a way to carry out the laws. This is controlled by the president and the vice president. Article 3, judicial branch. Sets up a way to judge the laws. Supreme Court and the lower federal courts. Article 4, the states. Says that states must honor each other's laws. Sets rules for admitting new states. Guarantees Republican government in states. Article 5, amendments. Sets up a way to change the Constitution. Article 6, Supreme Law. States that the Constitution is the highest law of the land. Ratification. Ratification sets up how the states must vote for the Constitution to become a law. The amendments to the U.S. Constitution. The First Amendment, and all of these ones that I'm going to list first were in 1791. The First Amendment protects freedoms of religion, speech, press, and assembly. The Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms. States may have an emergency army. The Third Amendment protects people from having to house soldiers during peacetime. The Fourth protects people and their property from government searches without good reason. The Fifth sets up the grand jury, protects citizens against having to face trial more than once. Guarantees due process. The Sixth guarantees fair and quick trial for accused persons. The Seventh guarantees a jury trial for court cases. The Eighth guarantees reasonable treatment and punishment for accused persons. The Ninth reserves for the people are rights, all rights not listed in the Constitution. All right. The amendments of the Constitution continued. The 11th Amendment was adopted in 1798, protects the states from federal lawsuits. The 12th was adopted in 1804, requires a separate vote for president and a separate vote for vice president in the Electoral College. The 13th, in 1865, it was adopted, and it ends slavery in the United States of America. The 14th, in 1868, grants citizenship to African Americans, protects people's rights from unfair treatment by state governments. The 15th, in 1870, grants African Americans the rights to vote. The 16th, adopted in 1913, sets up a federal income tax. The 17th, in 1913, allows people of each state to directly elect their own senators to Congress. The 18th, in 1919, outlaws manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol beverage. The 19th, in 1920, grants women the right to vote. In 1933, sets dates for the beginning of Congress's meetings and president's term of office. All right. Okay, the amendments to the U.S. Constitution. The 11th Amendment was adopted in 1798. It protects state and federal lawsuits. The 12th was in 1804. Requires a separate vote for president and a separate vote for vice president in an electoral college. The 13th was in 1865, ends slavery in the United States. The 14th was adopted in 1868, grants citizenship to African Americans, protects people's rights from unfair treatment by state governments. The 15th was adopted in 1870, grants African Americans the right to vote. The 16th in 1913 sets up a federal income tax. The 17th allows people of each state to directly elect their own senators to Congress. The 18th, 1919, allows manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverage. 19th in 1920 grants women the right to vote. The 20th in 1933 sets dates for the beginning of Congress's meetings and president's term of office. Okay, the 11th was amended in 1790. It was adopted in 1798. Protects the states from federal lawsuits. The 12th in 1804 requires a separate vote for president and a separate vote for vice president in the Electoral College. Okay, we're going to skip ahead. The 21st Amendment in 1933 repeals or ends the 18th Amendment. The 22nd in 1951 allows presidents to have only 2 elected terms. 23rd in 1961 grants citizens of Washington, D.C. the right to vote for president. The 24th in 1964 ends taxes on voting in national elections. 25th in 1967 sets guidelines for filling the offices of president and vice president should they become vacant. 26th in 1971 grants 18-year-olds the right to vote. 27th in 1992 stops Congress from increasing the salary of its current members. Okay, check your understanding. List the basic principles behind the U.S. Constitution. Write your own brief description of the 4th and 5th Amendments to the Constitution. You don't have to do that, but you should probably go back and make sure you know the answers. Okay, a plan for government in 7 articles. The preamble. The Constitution opens with a few words that tell you its purpose. These words are called the preamble. It states that the Constitution is to set up ways to keep the country safe, peaceful, and fair in its laws. Article 1 to 3, separation of powers. The first 3 articles separate the powers of government into 3 branches. Each branch is given some powers over the other 2 branches. Article 1, the legislative branch. This article creates a Congress with the power to make laws. It lists its powers and duties. Congress is set up in 2 houses. One is the Senate, the other is the House of Representatives. Article 2, the executive branch. This article describes the duties of the president. It gives the president the power to carry out laws and to represent our country in dealings with other countries. The president is also the head of all the country's armed forces. The president can ask for laws to be passed that will help the country. The president must also report to Congress on the well-being of the country. Article 3, the judicial branch. This article creates the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. This article gives the court the power to decide final appeals of all cases. It decides whether laws follow the Constitution. The article also gives Congress the power to set up lower federal courts. Article 4, state governments. All states have to honor the laws of the other states. If you are married in California, then you are still married when you visit Florida. In addition, if citizens have rights and privileges in one state, these rights are guaranteed in the others, too. Suppose you live in a state where you can drive at the age of 16. What happens when you drive into a state where you have to be 18 to drive? Although you are underage, you could still drive in the state you are visiting. Article 4 also guarantees that each state will have a government with 3 branches. Therefore, in every state, you find a legislative, an executive, and a judicial branch. Article 5, Making Changes. This article describes the methods for making changes, amendments. Okay, and stop. Article 5, Making Changes. This article describes the methods for making changes or amendments to the Constitution. The idea of allowing the Constitution to be changed goes along with the idea of government by the people. The people made the Constitution, so the people can change it. However, the writers of the Constitution did not make it easy to amend it. Ideas for amendments must be passed by 2/3 of the Congress. In other words, 67 out of 100 senators must vote for any change. In addition, 290 out of 435 representatives must vote for it. After that, 3/4 of the states, either in their legislatures or in special conventions, must also pass the amendment. That means that 38 states must ratify the amendment. There is another method for amending the Constitution. 2/3 of the states, which is 34 states, can ask Congress to call a national convention to propose an amendment. Then the amendment must be ratified by 3/4 of the states. This can be done either in their legislatures or in special conventions. Article 6. The Constitution is supreme law. The sixth article makes the Constitution the highest law of the land. All representatives and leaders in governments must swear to obey and uphold the Constitution. All state and federal laws in the land must uphold the Constitution. If a state or federal law seems to go against the Constitution, it can be challenged before the Supreme Court. If the court finds that the law is unconstitutional, the law is struck down. Here, for example, are some laws that would be unconstitutional. If a state raises its voting age to 21, a state sets up a dictatorship. Congress passes a law to end the presidency. Article 7, Ratification. The Constitution had to be ratified or passed by the states in order for it to become a law. Each state sent representatives to its own constitutional convention. 9 of the 13 states had to ratify the Constitution before it would take effect. Here's the history fact. Almost 2 years went by before the necessary 9 states ratified the Constitution. Only after the Bill of Rights was added did all 13 states ratify it. Okay, check your understanding. You don't have to do it, but you should know what the purpose of the Constitution is. Describe the powers the Constitution gives to the judicial branch of the government. And what does the Constitution say about state governments? Okay, government skills. Studying important documents. To understand the U.S. system of government, you must first understand the documents that established it. The 2 most important documents in our history are the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Both of these documents are reprinted in Appendix A and Appendix B in the back of this book. They are printed in their original words. Parts of them may be difficult to understand in studying these important documents. Look up any unfamiliar words in the dictionary. A, the Declaration of Independence is written in 3 sections. Read each section carefully. Then try to answer one of these questions. You guys should do this, just so you know. This is very important stuff. B, study the first 3 articles of the Constitution, then answer these questions. Moving on. Landmark changes in the law, the Bill of Rights. By the summer of 1788, 9 states had ratified the Constitution, and there was strong support for passage in the remaining states. Still, many people felt the Constitution needed to be strengthened. They thought it did not provide enough protection for the rights of individuals here. Okay. The first session of Congress was held in March 1789. The new lawmakers soon took up the matter of making changes to the Constitution. James Madison, a member of the House of Representatives, suggested 9 amendments. These additions spelled out many basic rights for the people. During the next few months, the other congressmen made suggestions as well. Finally, in the fall of 1789, 12 amendments were proposed to the states to be ratified. Thomas Jefferson must have been particularly pleased. As the author of the Declaration of Independence, he was a strong believer in individual freedoms. He had supported passage of the Constitution as one condition. Congress would have to add a listing of basic rights immediately after it began its first session. In December 1791, the states ratified 10 of the 12 amendments. These amendments as a group became known as the Bill of Rights. Together they established the great freedoms we cherish: freedom of the press, speech, and religion, freedom of security of the person, and fair and equal protection under the law. These first changes to the Constitution created an even stronger foundation for government. In time, they were used to guarantee to all Americans the basic rights fought for and won in the War for Independence. The 14th